Hey Ken, this is Greg. It's Friday, April the 8th, year 2022. Here to discuss with you chapters 30, I think it's 37 through 40, if I remember right, from the book Holes. These are fairly short chapters. I just read them this morning. But we get in here in chapter 37, and they're getting there. They've climbed up to the top. They can't. It says Stanley could no longer see Big Thumb. The slope of the mountain was in the way. So they're there. They're there at the ledge. Zero eventually gets to the point during this part of the reading that he's just physically unable to move on. Stanley tries to coax him, tries to give him words to spell, to see what to keep Zero's mind off of the hunger and the pain that he is enduring. And then he promises him here at the end of this chapter. He says, "Come on, I've already ordered your hot fudge sundae. They're making it right now." And Zero said nothing. So Zero was pretty much out of the picture. Something that went on in this chapter that it took a while for Stanley to figure out was that there was weeds there, and there were gnats, there were bugs, and he didn't put two and two together real quickly. He didn't put the understanding together. If there's weeds here, there has to be water of some kind. If there's gnats here, then they have to be living on something, and where gnats live on decaying, rotting plant material. I don't know if you ever had, if your family likes bananas, but my wife loves bananas. I always have to make sure when I go to the store, grab her a bunch of bananas. And in the summertime, especially, if you don't eat them up in a timely manner, you get these little gnats that are flying all around the bananas, and they're driving you crazy. But Stanley's focus was upon survival at this moment and getting Zero to a place where he could, where you get some water, some food, if at all possible. And so he was not quite able to put two and two together real quickly. It didn't take him long to figure it out. He finally got to it. Chapter 38 here. Of course, Zero is just, he's nothing. And Stanley had to, like a fireman's carry, he had to just throw Zero over his shoulder and carry him up the hill. I went out for basketball when I was in the 8th grade. And if I've told you a story, I apologize. If I have, I'll try to make it the same story that I told you last time. I come from an athletic family. My older brother was just a natural at basketball and at baseball. My younger brother was good at everything he ever did. And I was the middle boy, and I wasn't bad. It just compared to my brothers, I was not very good. I played basketball in 5th grade, broke my arm, not playing basketball, broke my arm roller skating. Broke my arm, had to miss most of the season. 6th grade, I played the entire year. 7th grade, I didn't play. 7th grade involved something else that I was not interested in. I was a huge boy. I was, every year in elementary school when they weighed us and measured us, I was the tallest boy in class. I was the tallest child in class, and I weighed the most as well. I was, my mother had to buy husky pants. I'll never forget the term. She had to buy husky pants for me. I was just a big. My older brother called me a fire plug, even though I wasn't short, but short and round. And I was a big boy. 8th grade, I decided I was going to go out for basketball, and I was going to stick it out. We had conditioning that started right after school started, and here in I guess it's the same way in Pennsylvania, but here in Indiana, in August, which is when our school started, in August it's really hot and it's really humid. Now, for our basketball conditioning, we had to run a cross-country course every day until the last 2 weeks when we had to run a cross-country course and half of another one. So at that time, cross-country was 2 miles. So we had to run 2 miles every day. And again, I was huge. I was a big, big boy. I went to the hospital when I was in 5th grade. That's when I broke my arm. And they weighed me. That's the first time I've been weighed in I don't know how long that I remembered that I cared. And I weighed 119 pounds early in the 5th grade. So I had some kids that I was in school with probably didn't weigh 60, 70 pounds, soaking wet. But anyway, this story does have a point, by the way. I was huge, and for about 7 weeks, we had to do basketball conditioning after school every day, Monday through Friday. And like I said, for about the first 4 or 5 weeks, we ran a cross-country course. We ran 2 miles, and then the last 2 weeks, we ran 3 miles. We ran a cross-country course and half of another one. It just so turned out. Now, I had some skills playing basketball, but again, I was huge. And I didn't even know if I was going to make the team or not, and I was especially discouraged because every day that we ran the cross-country course, we did the conditioning, I finished dead last every day. And it was a struggle for me. My legs were so fat at that time. We had to run every day, and my legs were rubbing together, and they got real chafed and red, and they had all these, the skin, broken skin and stuff like that. And it was painful sometimes just to walk, let alone run. And my basketball coach, he would find strategic positions to watch us as we ran the basketball, as we ran the cross-country course. And if I stopped, he would yell at me, trudging along. And I wasn't even close to anybody else. I was that far back on the cross-country course. So when it came time for us to go in, we could officially start practicing basketball inside. We went in, and I didn't get cut. I was shocked. I really was. I made the team. I think he kept 15 players. And I did not realize what was happening to me during this conditioning. I'm guessing, and I think this is a pretty accurate guess, I'm guessing that I lost about 75 pounds not just during conditioning, but during basketball as well. We were in 8th grade. Our basketball practice didn't start till 4:30. 7th grade went from 3 o'clock till 4:30, and then 8th grade went from 4:30 to 6. But one of the things that we had to do before our practice, we started about 4 o'clock, and our coach had us run these giant bleacher laps, not just a regular bleacher laps, it was a giant. The school I went to had a 2nd floor on it, and it had stairwells at each end of the top hall, where you had to go up the stairwells to get onto the top floor. And then we would run up those, run across, run down the opposite stairwells, and we'd eventually make our way into the gym where we ran a regular bleacher lap, and then that would be one. Well, I figured it out. It was probably about 2 miles that we ran every day before we practiced. And so, like I said, over the course of this basketball season, I just lost a lot of weight. I was unaware of it, and I don't know if you've ever had stuff like this, how you change. I remember when that year as well, my voice changed. My sister was in college. It might have been the year before. And she called home, and I answered the phone, and she didn't recognize me because my voice had changed. I'd reached puberty. And I was unaware of what had happened. So when I lost all this weight, and suddenly I was no longer a slug, I was as strong as the other kids, and I had as much strength and energy as everybody else. And then we ended the practice each day. He had us, our coach had us run between 10 and 20 suicides. You run to the free throw line and back, then half court and back, other free throw line and back, and then full court and back, all in, that's all in one trip. And we ran somewhere between 10 and 20 of those every day. And so I was just literally sweating the fat off of me. And that continued into my high school. Now, my 8th grade year, I have to tell you this, academically, it was my best year ever. I got more accomplished, and I know it was just all physical, and of course you got the mental aspect as well. You start feeling better about yourself, and you start seeing yourself in a little bit different light. but weight has always been an issue with me, except for about those 3 years, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, when I was in high school. And, it was a challenge. Well, Stanley here, and I know I mentioned this earlier, he had been digging all these holes in the heat of the day out there under the Texas sun. And unbeknownst to him, now, the movie doesn't portray this like the book does. The book portrays Stanley as a fat young boy, a very chubby young boy, like me, like I was. The movie doesn't portray it like that at all. We just see Stanley, and Stanley's the way he is. And so the movie cannot bring out what I'm getting ready to say here. Stanley, however long he'd been there, 7 weeks, he had sweated off the fat, just like I sweated off the fat when I was in 8th grade, running the conditioning course for basketball, and he didn't even realize it. He was the same way. Remember, he was able to crawl underneath the boat. And I guess he had a little revelation there that it's not too small for him, not too narrow. He could actually do it now. But the part in this book, in this reading of these chapters here, Stanley himself was amazed that he was able to carry Hector, Zero, all the way up the side, of the hill to the ledge. Remember, I think it was in the last chapter, he was really amazed and in disbelief. He was looking for the shovel. And he said, it couldn't have gone down this far because I couldn't have carried Zero all the way up the hill. And he looked up, from this far down. And in actuality, the shovel was down even farther, and it wasn't like he dropped it and it rolled down. It just dropped it and it stayed in its spot, because remember, he had the jars there as well. And they weren't broken, so he knew they didn't roll either, but the jars were there with the shovel. And so tremendous change had come over Stanley in this, about 6 weeks' time, where he had gotten in much better physical shape, and he was unaware of what he was able to do, and unaware of what he was able to accomplish. Now, again, I know we've talked about this a couple different times about how things, this is a story, and so the author can make it however he or she wants, but how things work together in so many aspects so that the storyline, this plot of the story can continue on, and so that the resolution could be had in a timely manner, and everything just kind of worked out the way they are, such as Stanley meeting Hector, Zero, there at the camp, Stanley digging the holes, them getting to the top of the Big Thumb, where the onions grow and where there's water, which they would never have discovered that if Zero wouldn't have run away. And again, Stanley and Zero becoming best friends, and how all these plot elements, they work together to get the desired result by the author. And some people say, well, that's just contrived. Well, sometimes it is. It's still a good story. I still like the plot, and I still like the resolution as well. Here in chapter 38, the second chapter, I'm just looking here on the right-hand page, it's talking about Stanley. As he lay face down in the muddy ditch, he didn't know if he'd ever get up again. He didn't know if he'd even try. He had come all this way just to, and then he had a thought. You need water to make mud. So he's lying there in the mud, and finally, the light bulb comes on over his head. There's mud here. That means there must be water, and it's more than just if you had a shower here. And it's deeper than that. So he dug a hole and he got some water out, and he let Zero sleep till the next morning. But he discovered the onions as well. And of course, I don't know if Sam had actually planted these onions or he just discovered them or what. Somebody planted them at some point. They just didn't grow there on their own. But someone had done it years and years, at least 100 years ago. And they had what we talked about yesterday. Some of the things we do today are going to affect ours and other people's futures. And so these people who are no longer living never got to see the ultimate fruit of what they, of what they had done, of what they had planted, what they had accomplished. I know as Christians, we think the same thing. I just wish I could see immediate fruit. I'm planting seeds. I'm leaving seeds in people's lives. I think it as a teacher as well. I'm leaving seeds in these students' lives. I just wish I could see some of the results that's going to happen. I'm 65 years old now. I'm only going to be around just a few more years, and some of them will end up getting married, getting out of school, getting married, have children, and some of them will have great jobs and great careers and just be wonderful people, and others, the only memory I'll have of them is what they were when they were middle school kids. And I wondered to myself, well, did they ever grow up? So anyway, Stanley gets the thought, great, there must be water around here. And at the end of this chapter, he gives some to Zero. This chapter 39 here, we get the confession by Zero that I think Stanley thinks Zero's talking deliriously here, talking out of his head, because Zero, Stanley was in great fear of Zero's life, and I imagine Zero was as well. And this is almost like a deathbed confession. Zero tells Stanley, he says, what do you say? I got your shoes. First of all, he starts out, listen, Zero insisted. Then he closed his eyes as his face twisted in pain. I'm listening, Stanley whispered. I took your shoes, Zero said. Stanley didn't know what he was talking about. His shoes were on his feet. Well, that's all right, he said. Just rest now. It's all my fault, said Zero. It's nobody's fault, said Stanley. I didn't know, Zero said. That's okay, Stanley said. Just rest. Zero closed his eyes, but then again he said, I didn't know about the shoes. What shoes? From the shelter. It took a moment for Stanley to comprehend. Clyde Livingston's shoes? I'm sorry, said Zero. Stanley stared at him. It was impossible. Zero was delirious. This is what Stanley's thinking. Zero's confession seemed to bring him some relief. The muscles in his face relaxed. As he drifted into sleep, Stanley softly sang him the song that had been in his family for generations, and I don't know the tune of this. If only the woodpecker sighs. The bark on the tree was just a little bit softer. While the wolf waits below, hungry and lonely, he cries to the moon, if only, if only. All right, so Stanley doesn't understand what Zero is saying. Zero is, confessing up that it was his fault that Stanley was there. But in reality, Stanley and Zero were both necessary ingredients to break these two curses, the one on the Yelnats family and the one on Camp Green Lake. And if either one of them had been absent, this plot probably wouldn't have been resolved. Stanley's family would still be in dire straits, and Camp Green Lake would still be, still a desert lake bed with nothing there, and probably the warden, the Walker family, still digging for the treasure. All right, in chapter 40 here, it makes a jump almost immediately back to Sam. And he says, onions, fresh, hot, sweet onions, Sam called as Mary Lou pulled the cart down the main street, 8 cents a dozen. And it gives a little section here and talks about Sam, giving onions to this woman and saving the woman's daughter's life, and so on and so forth. And then it fades away from Sam again. And then it goes back to Stanley and Zero. And I think, more than anything, the point the author was trying to make here, Stanley and Zero, starting at this point, they were getting fed and they were getting water, and so they were going to survive. And they were living solely on onions. So I think the part of him making a flashback to Sam is that the medicinal properties, apparently, of these onions, and how now Zero and Stanley are living on the onions, and Zero is starting to recover his strength, and the effects, the future effects it's going to have as well. The yellow-spotted lizards are not going to eat them or bite them and kill them And, with Stanley's father, the peach and the onions, as part of his solution. The last part of this chapter, and I've already talked about this, is Stanley looking for his shovel. He wants to get the shovel to dig a better hole so they can get more water and better water as well. Stanley headed down the mountain. The sleep in the onions had done him a lot of good as well. He felt strong. It was fairly easy to follow the trail he had made 2 days earlier. There were a few places where he wasn't sure he was going the right way, but it just took a little bit of searching until he found the trail again. He went quite a ways down the mountain, but still didn't find the shovel. And then he looked back up to the top of the mountain. He convinced himself he must have walked right past the shovel, he thought. There was no way he could have carried Zero all the way up to where he is from this place here. Still, he continued to head downward just in case. He came to a bare spot between two large patches of weeds and sat down to rest. Now he had definitely gone too far, he decided. He was tired out from walking down the hill. It would have been impossible for him to have carried Zero up the hill from here, especially after walking all day with no food or water. The shovel must be buried in some weeds. Before starting back up, he took one last look around in all directions. He saw a large indentation in the weeds a little farther down the mountain. It didn't seem likely that the shovel could be there, but he'd already come this far. There, lying in some tall weeds, he found the shovel and a sack of jars. He was amazed. He wondered if the shovel and sack might have rolled down the hill, but none of the jars were broken except the one which had broken earlier. And if they had rolled down the hill, it is doubtful that he would have found the sack and the shovel side by side. On his way back up the mountain, Stanley had to sit down and rest several times. It was a long, hard climb. Stanley may or may not have, at this point, put two and two together and realized, I think it was actually early in the chapter, realized what a physical change had come over him, what a mental change as well. Stanley's history and family history is just complete failure at almost everything they do. Stanley, by showing determination and by using his newfound strength, was able to rescue Hector Zeroni, from what Stanley would have to consider an impossible situation. But at the same time, and we know this because we've read ahead, in carrying Zero up the hill, he fulfilled Madame Zeroni's request, even though it wasn't to her, but it was with her descendant. Stanley's great-great-grandfather was supposed to have carried Madame Zeroni up the hill one time. And here, Stanley found almost supernatural strength to carry Madame Zeroni's, great-great-grandchild up this hill, and thus fulfilling the requirements that Madame Zeroni had on the great-great-grandfather. So, anyway, that's where we're going to leave off. It's a Friday, and it's about 20 till 3. I'm ready to get home. I'm kind of ahead of the game in everything I'm doing today. I actually had an extra planning period today, and I was going to come here and record this then, but I just got talking with some friends, some teachers, which is important as well. So I'll be back on Monday. We'll finish this book next week. Probably it'll take us 3 days to get through this. I'm assuming, unless I go 5 chapters at a time. I don't know. But we'll get through it either, assuming that I get, Mondays are hard days for me to record because they use my class during my planning period. Probably looking at, I guess it could be Tuesday or it could be Wednesday. We got to be finished with this book whole. So you have a good weekend, Ken, and I will talk to you on Monday. See you later.